Hey everybody, welcome back to the Tattoos with Intention podcast. I'm your host, Mark. I'm really glad that you're listening once again. So just a quick note before we start, if you enjoy listening or find the conversations that I'm having on this podcast useful, could you please go ahead and click the follow button. That helps spread these conversations of intentionality and some of the undercurrents of tattooing that go unnoticed more than anything else you could do. I'd really appreciate that. This podcast is scheduled for one episode a month for the rest of the year. It's zero cost information that's aimed to give you insights and tools that will be beneficial in regards to relating to your own tattoo journey in a more meaningful way. And as I mentioned, giving us a follow, spreading the word would be really appreciated. Okay, so you may have noticed that in the last handful of episodes, I've been focusing on the layers underneath the surface of a tattoo, what they do for people as a process, rather than what they are as an artwork or the physical result. And the best way I've found to convey this is just to talk to the people that I've been tattooing. So in today's episode, we have another reflective client conversation. Like I said, I've put a few of these up now, but I'll probably give it a break in the next quarter and start to focus on some other areas of inquiry. But I just couldn't pass up an opportunity to chat with today's guest, Lee, when he agreed to jump on. Being an experienced guide and a therapist himself, in this chat we get to unpack a broad range of concepts. We draw on his experience of receiving a tattoo as the foundation for our talk. But we go into ideas like the feeling of yes when spirit green lights a path that you're on, or pain as a teacher, or the very real therapeutic opportunity that comes when you're getting tattooed, and the responsibility of that. And the most important yet simple aspects for a healthy community and culture, and a whole lot more. So I hope you find Lee's insights as beneficial as I have when I've spent the small amount of time with him that I have. And be sure to stick around till the end if you want to hear how you can get in contact with Lee or how to work with him and what his offerings are. Hope you enjoy. Pre-tattooing, us coming together and working on your tattoo, what that process was like for you and how you landed there. I think that's a good spot to start from.
I know the moment I got the yes in my body that this tattooing path was something for me was when my wife said, hey, there's this guy in Mullum who does this kind of intentional tattooing. And there's something lit up in me.
Mm-hmm.
I'd always been interested in tattoos. I always thought they were beautiful. I sometimes thought, wow, it'd be amazing to have like a big koi sleeve, or it'd be really cool to have. But I never could get myself past the point of it being cool to it being something that I was actually going to do. And there was also a bit of kind of, well, it's for cool people. I'm not cool enough maybe to do that kind of thing. But then when she said, oh, there's this guy doing it, it's intentional kind of tattoo as a ceremony, I was like, ding. I was like, yes, that's for me. I didn't really have a clear sense of what that was going to look like. I just knew that there's something in me. It just was really not only opening to that, but wanting that, sort of yearning in some way. And it was quite a familiar feeling to times in the past when I've had yearnings for some kind of a transformational experience, because my journey has been growing up doing the forest school camps in the UK, where we would come together in these kind of village camps as a kid. And on the outside, it's just a bunch of people camping. But on the inside, for me, it was this glimpse going from inner city high school, where I felt like it was kind of prison, look at the wrong person in the eye and you might have to get beaten up or have to fight them. And then suddenly going out to these fields where we were creating a village where there was this sort of appreciation of diversity, there was this joy, and there was this feeling of transformation. It felt like this rewilding, this coming back into a tribe paradigm, coming back into deep relationship with nature, coming back into this deep relationship with myself. So I was having those kinds of transformational experiences as a kid. And from quite early on, feeling like, oh, this is the way to live. I knew there was another way to live. I thought there was. This is what I want my life to be now. And so then when I was old enough, becoming a staff member for those camps and helping to run those kinds of programs, and then that leading into learning primitive survival skills, indigenous survival skills in the States through Tom Brown's Tracker School, through Native American lineage, and vision questing, and then training as a psychotherapist, and seeing that also each psychotherapy session as a kind of a ceremony of transformation, where we're looking to go beneath the surface, reweave tattered or frayed connections, and really ultimately, I guess, have a fuller and deeper experience of self. And any time I was sort of called to my own experiences with that, like vision questing, 4 day solo or something like that, there'd be this moment where it'd be like, ah, yes, that's for me. That's what I want. Something lighting up, this ding.
Mm.
Often can almost think of it as this, there's a sort of a golden thread that's woven through, to me, I think, all lives. And sometimes we get to glimpse it really clearly and we feel like we're really in the flow of that golden path. And other times it seems a bit more distant and harder to contact that. But I had that kind of that yes, that this is in the path, this is in the flow around that, this kind of joining this tattoo path in that moment. And then after that was,
Mm.
in a way, everything else was secondary. Things started to land in, and I started to get a sense of what it was that was going to start that process.
Interesting. Yeah, so like one of the things I can hear in that, like I was saying, in terms of you coming into it and not having any markings yet and already being in a state where it's like what the tattoo is about is pretty formed. And not a lot of people are in that place. They've already dipped their toes in. You were living like from that initial point as a kid going to those village camps, you already correlated, like you said, this is how you should live or how I want to live, right? And so
Hmm.
you've already been on this path of living intentionally or like living with meaning or purpose. And I was thinking about this the other day.
Hmm.
People want to have meaningful tattoos. Even you, the idea of, oh, there's an intentional tattoo, that sounds right. But if you want a meaningful tattoo or an intentional tattoo, you need to be living a meaningful life. You need to be intentionally living because then the tattoo will just correlate, right? If you're not
Hmm.
living that way, then the tattoo's not going to have it. So I think for some people, they come on board and start getting tattooed intentionally, and that kind of might spark something, or it might be happening in conjunction with some other little meaningful thing, and they vibe off each other, and then their life might start to have all these unfoldments. Whereas I think, yeah, you've come in and the amount of aligning you've already done within yourself is very obvious. Like to me, doing the tattoo for you, and I haven't shared it with you as fully as I probably will here.
Right.
Um, but I can read in your tattoo that there's a, like you were saying to me, the archetypes of tattoos. I've been thinking about that a lot. You've got it from your psychotherapeutic lens, but I've started to
Hmm.
pinpoint a few of them. And there's the rebel,
Wow.
or there's the boys in the belonging stage. And there is this,
Mm.
not that the language is accurate, but like something that's like more chiefly or like in a more mature stage of your comprehension and participation in that arena of life, the intentional living space.
Mm.
It makes sense when I hear it, what's been happening for you prior to, and then it not really landing in the commercial sense or in a aesthetic cool sense, because that stuff's not really important.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
soon as that little
Yeah.
opening's there, you're like, okay, oh, this seems like the right opening. I'll dive into it.
Yeah, that was how it felt for me. It was very much a kind of like a revealing of something and a celebrating of something, or a kind of a marking of something that was already there. Some kind of yeah, bringing forth.
Yeah, that's a bit of a a scripted line too when people talk about it afterwards, as if, oh, hard to think about that not being there or it being the familiarity of the marking too. Not that I got language for that golden thread that you're talking about, or the connected
Mm.
layers in things where it's not just tattooing. There's other things there that correlate to it. But I do see it. I do see it, especially when it's a situation like your own, where you're coming in and it's. I feel like a lot of it's already written. We just got to
Huh.
uncover it a bit, like archaeological dig.
Yeah.
Bring it up a
Nice.
little bit.
I had that. Yeah, a couple of people said to me, "Have you always had that tattoo?" Oh, I wasn't sure if that was new or if you just always had that. It looked like that seemed to be
Mm,
you, or seemed to be something that. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and so the first one, well, it's like you only have one tattoo, right? We've looked into it and, you know, shifted things so we share that viewpoint. But initially you came in and you wanted some eels, right? That was the first
Hmm.
time you reached out. And then since that point, how many times have we tattooed now? Like how many days of tattooing have you had on your tattoo?
I think it's 7 days.
Okay, 7 all up. And so how would you describe your tattoo now? Because it started as one thing, they do, I'm kinda used to it, but for you, not having any, it's
Mm.
yeah, how would you describe where you started with it and where it is now? And
Yeah, I'm still thinking about it as like the eels and the flowers, but
mhm.
yeah, definitely they're feeling like they're in relationship with each other. Feels like there's some kind of a suit that's coming together.
What was your intention? What motivated you to actually get a marking? How do you work out what to get when you're someone who's not getting tattooed
Yeah.
because it's cool?
Yeah, it was a cool experience. So that after that yes came, just I was almost watching things coalesce, kind of feelings coalesce and meaning coalesce and images coalesce, and trying to put a rationale on something in hindsight. Hindsight's 2020. You can always make up a narrative, but actually, it's hard to piece it together. I can say it made logical sense that I started on my hips because I wanted it to be out of sight, or it made logical
Mhm,
sense that I want it to be eel because there's all kinds of meaning and dreamtime significance in the land that I have deep connection with around eels. And I'd had these two really powerful experiences with two different eels that felt like a really deep teaching. So it really made
mhm,
sense to have two eels. Uh, but then, yeah, there's this other part that was around kind of a rite of passage or a transition in my life where I was moving from. It really felt like I was moving from kind of being in that archetypal journeyman phase. You know, it's sort of the journeyman traditionally is you're accumulating skills, you're learning from masters, and you're honing your craft, and then you moving into in the traditional apprentice journey that you'd make your masterpiece, the piece that would signify that you'd learned enough skills that you could be a master yourself. And then you move into this different phase of giving and teaching, and
mm,
not so much about accumulating knowledge, but just giving of your experience. And I really felt like I was moving into that sort of, how old was I? I guess around 40. And I was
mhm,
moving from just being a psychotherapist to now starting to teach psychotherapists. And yeah, and there was this resonance with the eel because the eels spend years accumulating body weight, and then suddenly at some point something shifts in them and they develop sexual organs. They don't have even a sex organs, and now their life becomes about the creation of new life and the perpetuating of the eel lineage. And they go on this incredible
mm,
journey from these inland rivers. They go thousands of kilometers out to these deep sea abyssal trenches that we've never seen. There's this incredible sort of metaphor of deep mystery, the invisible, the unseen, but something also eternal. And they basically sacrificed their lives to get there. They're like, this is my purpose now. They've got this single-minded focus. When they turn up to these trenches, they've almost wasted away. They've been described as just skeletons with reproductive organs. And they
wow,
disappear into the darkness of that trench. And from the void emerges this profusion, these clouds of these tiny little glass nymph eels that then drift on ocean currents until they smell the fresh sweet water and they go back up river again and they start the cycle. And I think at 40, I was starting to feel like actually maybe there'd been a part of me that was just trying to accumulate financial security or be able to try and accumulate an identity that could feel strong or feel robust or feel some self-worth. And now it was time to shift that a little bit and start letting go of that, trying to bolster my ego or bolster. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was more about having secured a life that works and a family and a craft that feels good. Now moving into this generosity and service phase where I could start to really dial in on what's my purpose now in this new chapter in the same way that those eels do.
yeah, that's such a nice metaphor, the eel, hey, and it makes me think
Yeah,
about the staging of it. It sounds like a graduating for you, like
yeah,
that journeyman accumulating knowledge and that correlating with, I feel capable as a psychotherapist, and I'm gonna share some things that I've gleaned. So you're graduating and you're
yeah.
stepping into that, simultaneously stepping into sharing, maybe
Mm,
that moving from that journeyman archetype to what I was saying might be this kind of like more elder chief sort of space.
mm,
Age of 40, stage of graduation, you've already received, but you're moving into getting quite a substantial tattoo too. Yeah, so for people listening, it's not like Lee came in and we drew a little eel on his hip that would be hidden by his belt line or something, you know. And so what we're talking about there in terms of the motivation or the energy that moved you into the process and that was correlating with what was happening in your life I'd say that's the spiritual wisdom layer. When you can draw on that and look at it and speak to it and understand that, there's that layer of the tattoo. And then there's the technical knowledge of it,
Hmm.
which is actually how that works on the body and fits. And so when Lee emailed me, I haven't reopened it, but I can remember you sent that initial drawing, and it was like Lee sent a picture and he'd drawn an eel where the head was on one hip and it wrapped around his lower back and onto his opposite hip. So quite a substantial tattoo. And that is the area
Mm.
or the footprint of where we ended up working, but it changed
Yeah.
a fair bit. One of the things I got down here to ask you is if you could speak into what it felt like for you in that initial session of like, here's my idea. I've never been tattooed and I haven't got rapport or like complete trust with Mark or with getting tattooed or with anything yet. Don't even know what it feels like.
Mhm.
And then how much it's developed and now where you are, how that trust and that rapport and all that sort of things there.
Yeah, yeah. It was nice. I sent you that super scruffy sketch of just me and my undies. I said, "How about
Yeah.
this?" And you said something like, "Great." And then you said something like it was that you like symmetry or symmetry is important. And I really like that. I was like, yeah, okay, that feels great. So you said, how about instead of this one eel that stretches across the hips and the back, we do two eels? And I was in the sort of the yes. I was like, yes, I like this. And it felt great. I was like, wow, this guy, he's got enough experience. I feel like he's got my back. He knows what's up. He's got this. There's a sense of what's going to work with the body. And you're really talking about in terms of how it's going to read well with the body and those kinds of things. So I said, yeah, two eels. Yeah, perfect. So that would cover even more body, more skin area. It's like down the buttocks and on the
Yeah.
hip and the sort of the sides of my body. I was just like, yes. And I think there was a moment there looking back which resonated with other transformational experiences I've had, like for instance, Vision Quest. I like 4 days solo in the bush, yes. And then I jump in, and then at some point through, I'm like, oh shit, what have I done actually? What did I say yes to?
Okay.
It's like the soul or the spirit says yes, and then the ego or the personality will find some way to get behind it. And then suddenly it's like, oh shit, this is what I've been almost feels lured into somehow. And
Mm.
yeah, for me, I'd had this wedding ring tattoo, this little wedding ring tattoo, and so I
Oh,
thought I
that's
knew what
right.
the
Yes.
sensation of tattooing
Yep.
was
Yep.
like.
Yep.
So then when you said, "Yeah, how about 2? This will go down, cover the buttocks," and I'm like, "Okay, even bigger? Sure, great, nice, yes." And then the minute the needle touched me, I was like, "Holy shit, what have I signed up for?" And similar to lots of times on Vision Quests, I quickly got into the place where I was like, "Oh wow, this is only my pride keeping me in here at this point." You know, if I could tap out now, if I could hit a button and rewind and say no to this, I might just do that. Um, and so, yeah, so I started that process, and it was like one whole day of outlining. I'm pretty sure it was anyway a long period of doing the
Yeah. Yeah.
outlines, and then there was a couple of I think was it a month or so, and then coming back and getting the shading, and it was grueling those first sessions. I didn't know what I signed up for. I'd said a big yes. I'd take this big leap into the unknown, and it felt like I slammed into something. We in Vision Questing we talk about setting your angle, and we try to give everyone a heads up on, hey, it's going to be hard, but these are the different ways in which it's going to be hard. And then these are the tools that you can use to meet
Uh,
that so that
uh,
as you dive into the quest, we want it to feel like a nice deep swan dive, this elegant depth where you go down a nice dive. And I felt like I belly flopped into that first tattoo process where I was really like feeling like I was just hanging on by my fingernails. And I was just like, I was having to lots of times explain to my body, like, hey, yes, we want this. Yes, we signed up for this because it felt like I was being like I felt like that there were scalpels going in, or like the imagery that my skin was telling me was like, hey, we might be getting maimed here, or there might be something badly wrong going on. And that was a lot of the experience for that first one was it. The eel metaphor for me was about commitment, and I just kept on having to come back to how committed am I to marking this transition in my life? How badly do I want this? And then I got to use the pain as a way to mark that commitment and say, okay, actually, this pain that I'm experiencing now, this is an offering. This is a sacrifice on the altar of what it represents for me. And doing that helped, but it still felt like after I came out of the second session that we had, it felt like a couple of weeks where I was like, I actually feel like I got some PTSD symptoms a little bit, in the sense
mm,
that there
mhm.
was like undigested distress in my body that I hadn't been able to process at the time because I was too busy just bearing it.
Holding on.
And just holding on. So for a couple of weeks after, I was having to do like shaking and crying and doing deep breathing and almost feeling like I was doing some horse whispering with my body, having to like just come back into relationship with my body and doing some apologizing for what it had been through and some kind of, hey, it's over now, it's done now thing, a bit of healing, which was in massive contrast to the second session that we had, the second tattoos with the flowers.
Yeah, I was going to lean into that as well because your body doesn't know what's going on. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
there's also the layer in your first one where you don't know what's going on. Like you said, you had a bit of false idea of what would happen from your finger. The reality of it
Mm,
was like very different. Like you were saying, you had to take yourself into a space of, I guess, readjusting and explaining on reflection to your body
yeah.
what's happened and moving that. I remember you doing a lot
Yeah.
of shaking even during the session. I was getting to that
That's
point
right. Yeah. I'd go off and
during it.
shake. Yeah.
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 And it's amazing, again, speaks to your approach to be in a place where you have enough awareness to be able to move energy through and see those things, because not everyone does.
Mm,
A lot of people would have a lot of things built up and held in their body from a result
mm.
of the tattoo, you know. But then, yeah, so in the next process, I think, which was like maybe a year between, when you came in for the upper body stuff, how you related to the pain or how you rode that process was like stark contrast, hey? And it was one of the notes you
So
put here
different.
was like you wanted to talk a bit about what you learned from the experience of the pain and that physical layer, hey?
Yeah. Because yeah, even after the eels, I came away feeling like I'd really learned something important about life. The thought I had was, when you understand about pain and you sort of reach a kind of level of pain, of comfort with the pain. It's not that it was easy to go through, but I got through it. It's like the hard things, we can't get through them elegantly, but we can get through them, and getting through them is its own kind of gift and lesson and reward. And after I got through the eels, I realized I had this different relationship with pain in the world now. And the thought I had was, if you understand about pain, if you change your relationship with pain, you change your relationship with life. You know, pain
Mm,
is suffering is so inherent to life. That's one of Buddha's first precepts. And it's such a beautiful little microcosm of suffering. It's this discrete chunk of really intense suffering. You really get to hone your skills and see what your relationship with the suffering is and see all the different ways that it's possible to relate to it. Sometimes feeling like a victim, sometimes trying to muscle through, sometimes going to the ego and saying, just think about all of the bragging rights I'm going to have after this when I tell people what I've been through or how cool it's going to look. And other times just, yeah, really deepening into the heart of it and finding the commitment and the meaning that elevates that pain from dogged suffering and turns it into a sacrifice, something that makes sacred. So I came to the second session, the flowers, with I mean, a really different intent for the tattoo, first of all, but also this accumulation of experience around the pain. My intent for the flowers was I'd had this, it was kind of a 10-year anniversary since my daughter had died. The daughter died at 3 years old from cancer 10 years previously. And I felt like I'd realized I'd come to this different relationship with the loss, with that pain, different relationship with that pain, moving away from feeling resent or dark or heavy towards actually almost like the fire had burned off a lot of the impurities of that pain and turned it into what was left was just mostly gratitude. Now it's mostly, wow, I got to be her dad for 3 years. I'm so grateful for that. And that realization felt like a graduation of its own. I had this image of
mm,
being surrounded by flowers, this kind of almost like those lei, the Hawaiian garland of flowers you get when it's like a welcoming back home or at the end of a race or something like that. I wanted this celebration. And so it was a moving away from that dogged, determined commitment suffering of the eel who's on the 1,000-kilometer swim to wanting to move into this softening, this opening, this fragrance, this ease and grace. And that was the intention going in. And then that absolutely showed up in the process. It meant that when I went into the process, I was like, yeah, I don't want to be gritting my teeth and forcing myself through this. So what's the alternative to that? Oh, the alternative is actually softening into this. And I found that the phrase that came into my head was, I'll feel this with you. And I was talking to my body in this because I noticed with the eels, I would do this kind of self-abandonment thing where I'd try to leave my body. I'd try to leave the pain. I'd try to think about something else or try to minimize it or trying to manipulate my mind into thinking of it in a different way. But this one, I just said, no, I'll be exactly with the sensation in this now moment without making it mean anything other than that I'll be with my body in this. There's a sort of a declaration of love or a declaration of solidarity and sensitivity. So opening up my sensitivity rather than trying to dial it down. I will feel this with you. Every single time the needle touched skin, that was what I'd do. I had to reaffirm it every time because
Mm.
that self-abandonment impulse was so strong. I'd notice it trying to slip in sideways. So I had to reaffirm it every single time. I'll feel this with you. I'll feel this with you. And each time, yeah, softening into this deeper layer of kind of kindredness and wholeness with myself. So much so I almost fell asleep at one point. There's these feelings of warmth and self-love, and it's almost turned the intensity of the sensation into a kind of ecstasy that made me start to drift off a little bit. And I found myself noticing I might be about to fall asleep on the table right now. Yeah, that lesson has been an absolute gift since then. It's been something that's informed my work and really given me clarity on that self-abandonment movement and what the antidote to that is. That's been helpful for me and my clients in my work. And yeah.
It's a beautiful reflection there. Hey, so many things in it
Mm,
that I could pull out and draw on. For me, the idea of suffering well, as opposed to like just getting through it. I can't remember where I heard someone speak to this, but the idea of I just went through this particular event, life event, something happening that was hard, and I had a bit of a tantrum. I didn't suffer well. And then being able to reflect on that, and then the next time it happened, going through it, and like you're saying, already having this acceptance of, okay, this is an opportunity to suffer this time in a way that's going to be good.
mm,
And
mm,
what can I learn from it, so to speak? And so I think of
mhm,
that, and
mhm,
it's a bit of a script when I'm going to tattoo anyone at the start. It's okay, just let your body know you're about to get opened, like cut and opened, and it doesn't know what's happening. It doesn't know that you want to be here. So you need to be in communication with it and let it know that it's okay. You're getting tattooed because you want to get tattooed. And that can be abstract for some people initially. But I think after you've got tattooed a few times, it's okay. You really got to let your body know that you are, yeah, like gifting it this particular experience that's not easy. It's a difficult thing. There's the challenge, and that's part of the value of it, the inherent challenge of receiving it, which is why I don't advocate for a lot of the numbing or painkillers or like quite physically people dissociating, not even just mentally. But it made me think about, you were saying each time the needle hit, you had to go into that space of being with it. And when Wind, my old teacher, used to cut people, he'd call them prayer cuts. So he'd do these little cuts. And there's like a whole nother layer that's like a little bit scary or like tormenting with getting cut too. If you don't get into a place of like this is a sacred thing, the idea of someone bringing a blade to your skin, it's not as appetizing as a tattoo machine. So it can be quite apprehensive and tense. But he'd always say, I'm about to cut. So he'd prompt you and he'd say, like, pray. And so as the cut's happening, it's only small, you'd be literally reciting or thinking of the prayer and correlating it to that
mm,
sensation.
mm,
This is for this. This is for this. And I think that, yeah, like opening up a dialogue, right? Opposed to running away from it is
mm,
really
mm,
useful
mm.
with the pain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just remembered we have a statue of the Hindu goddess Saraswati, and when I got it,
Isn't it?
the shopkeeper said, "Oh, this is made by devotees of Saraswati. Every time the tool touches the wood, they utter a prayer to her." Yeah, it makes me think. I think a similar process happens with the tattoo. Hey, there is something is getting transformed and created and built inside of you with each touch of the needle. You can really lean into that. It's like the difference between leaning forwards into the sharpness of that versus if you're leaning against it. Now I'm white knuckling and I feel like I'm being subjected to something, or is this torture rather than just an ordeal that's going to lead to something beautiful and significant and meaningful? Yeah.
Yeah, completely. It makes me think of a lot of the like the analogy of carving is synonymous with tattooing in a lot of cultures too, right? So you got the Maori culture as well. And they literally did carve the skin. So there was like cutting of the skin before any pigment went in to cause little
Whoa.
recesses in the skin. So this
Yikes.
shaping, carving process, and then formulated with prayer and incantation and all of those layers. So they'd be carving the body or tattooing it in the same way they'd carve a tree for a marae or something, right? They'd see the processes similar. So yeah, if you see it as forming yourself, this process, of course, it's abrasive. There's removal happening, and it's you know
Mm.
all of that's in there.
Mm.
Yeah, and so I guess in your second tattoo, we're talking to that layer of spiritual wisdom again. We're drawing into that, but then on the technical side, one of the things I remember that was big with the flowers, doing the chrysanthemums, was there was that point where we had that sticky point, remember? And
Yeah.
it was like, I ended up saying, I don't know what's happening, but maybe we shouldn't tattoo if it feels like this, pretty much. And
Mhm.
on reflection, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want you to speak into it too. But I think you were saying it was like a little bit of the mind uh, being aware of like time and then resource and money allocation to time. And are we going to get it done? Quite a heady layer that was there. And
Yeah.
we didn't clock it till after, maybe. But then on the same note, you also ended up sharing that maybe the next time you were here, that moment also allowed you to feel really supported in the process.
Yeah, the fact that you are making a stand and saying, "Hey, we're not gonna proceed actually until things feel right," but especially between us, particularly between us. Yeah, I think with the first tattoo, I was kinda yeah, the money thing was an issue for me. I was like, "Wow, this is a big chunk of money. How can I justify this to myself?" And I think
Mhm.
because I hadn't deepened into the ceremonial aspects and the transformational aspects, I was like, "This is just money just to put shapes on my skin. Like, how can I justify that?" And we had this bit at the end of the eel thing where you said, "Hey, let's leave this unfinished in case it wants to move into something else. We'll leave these scrolls here unfinished." And after that, I
Yep.
went away from that and I was like, "Damn, I hate that we left that unfinished." Like my OCD was like, "Damn it, now I got to
Mhm.
go back." Because originally I was like, "I'm just here for the eels. That's me. That's done. I can justify that and no
Yeah.
more." And I was like, "Shit, now it's not finished. I got to go back." So I think there was a part of me that had this idea: we got to get this finished, and I got to make sure that uh, it's not going to be unfinished again. So there's this sort of time
Yep.
pressure to it. So at a certain point, yeah, I think on the first day we were just talking and we're having conversations about things, and I realized I was like, "Oh my god, time's slipping away. Let's chit chat, chop. We got to get on it, Mark." And I had this
Yep.
sort of
Yep.
a feeling paradigm I was coming from was this quite commercial feeling of I'm the customer, I'm paying you this money, let's make sure the service happens. And I
Yep.
think a big part of that was my experience with transformational ceremonies was mostly about Vision Quest, which is just such a solo experience. So I was coming at it still from this perspective of I've got to go through this difficult thing. Mark's just the guy that's
Uh-huh.
got to do the marks. Like he's the craftsman, but this is fundamentally a solo process that I got to go through. I'm not sure this guy is really on a level with what my process is going to be. And what
Mhm.
you put your finger on was, hey, actually, there's tension between us right now. And actually, we don't have to carry on. And you said, hey, let's just stop a second and have a chat about this. And I was like already feeling time pressure. I was like, oh my God, what's going on here? Like maybe I should walk out and leave right now. But you had this like real gentle clarity and you were saying, so what's going on? And as I started to share with you, you were so good at listening and being like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. Okay, I understand. That makes sense. I see what's going on now. Yeah, we have to let go of that. Actually, we have to let go of that time constraint because that's not what this is actually here. There's something that's deeper and larger and more holistic than that. And what it requires is some spaciousness. What it requires is some surrender. Actually, what it requires, I felt like you were saying was, uh, there's a relationship between us that needs to be okay. And I've been trying to discount you from that relationship or just hold things back and keep them on in my own. And what I realized, oh, this is a transformational process that's really relational in a way that vision questing isn't. Vision questing is you go
Mm.
out into nature on your own and you find out what your relationship with God and nature is on your own. It just takes place between your heart and the heart of creation. It's no one else's business what goes out on there. But tattooing is very much more, for me, it feels like it's something that takes place not in the wilderness, but takes place at the edge of the village where there's still relation with the human realm. There's still this connection with this
Mm.
person who's amassed this experience and this craft and is bringing their love and their integrity and their skill to bestow something on you. And we creating that together. And as soon as I embrace that and I realize, oh, here's this guy who's absolutely in the service of the best. You said something like, bro, I got you. I'm here to have the
Yep.
best possible outcome. When I relaxed into that and I was like, oh, and I saw that fully and I wasn't like, oh, this guy doesn't understand, blah, 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 feeling like I was on my own. I realized, oh, this is something we're doing together. It deepened into this much more beautiful layer of my understanding of what tattooing was. Like, okay, I get to actually, yeah, be held in this process and be met. And this is something that happens in dialogue, not in monologue. That's huge. Yeah, and really thank
Yeah.
you for that.
No
Mm,
worries. Yeah, I mean that it speaks to that result focused orientation opposed to
yeah,
process oriented. And it's interesting that sort of happened there in between your experience of like fighting the pain. And then we popped that little layer there and we connected in a way that I
yeah,
think was like a lot more reciprocal. So the
yeah.
relationship I think was much more where we're meant to be meeting. And then you could have that experience of like really being in the process fully and not fighting it as well.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
what you said about tattooing being something that happens on the edge of the village, opposed to like vision quests where you literally leave the village and you're exposed to all of creation. I haven't heard that before, but
Mm,
it makes a lot of sense because some of the things I do think about in this act is all these people come to me and maybe they've already left the village. Maybe they're in a process of coming to the conclusion they need to leave the village. Or so I engage with people in these different stages. And I always feel like I'm just witnessing them on the edge of the village. That's a really good analogy. And they might be like, oh, I don't get to have these conversations in any other places, or I only had it when I was out of the village, or and everyone that comes
mm,
through here, I have these conversations with. It's like all the travelers pass,
mm,
or all the initiates pass through this space where this kind of like the witnessing and acknowledging and locking in. And it's not me. Who am I? I'm not some important person people need to check in with, but the process of you checking in and acknowledging it in the eye of the creator, so to speak, it's like, oh yeah, he has broken away and returned and gleaned this knowledge or been on that journey or that has landed. And
mm.
so much so that he's going, here it is. And then the tattoo materializes, so to speak. And yeah, I think another layer I can remember in that moment that is probably important for people to hear too is you are holding containers and environments for people all the time. You are in the process of teaching for 12 months as well. So I think,
Yeah.
and I don't know, you got to tell me if this is accurate, but I think there's something that was unfamiliar to drop in and actually be in an environment where you're not the one curating or holding it or something, or like
Yeah.
allowing that to happen for yourself too. It's another surrendering where
Absolutely.
yeah, you're just like your field is you are in charge, you are very sure. You're in a good way, in a humble way too. But like have to
Yeah.
crack that off a little bit.
Yeah, going from that sort of space holding facilitator, therapist place, parent place to saying, actually, I'm going to have to relax into being in this basket rather than trying to hold this basket. Very much what that felt like. When you said just now, who am I? I'm no one special. But actually, what I saw in that moment, that shift for me of the deepening understanding was that actually, I think when tattooing is done in a really holistic way, the tattooer is a bit of priest archetype, bit of therapist, space holding, and priest in the best sense where, priest it's become sort of like I'll mediate your relationship with spirit. But I think the best priests, and you do this really well, is I'll facilitate your creation, your relationship with spirit, and I'll be open to spirit too. And together we can triangulate together what's the deepest and fullest truth that we can express here. And yeah, you do that so
Yeah.
beautifully, so humbly and clearly. I really appreciate that. I let everyone know about that. I think it might be something that I feel like not many tattooers really understand the full responsibility and depth of that role.
Oh, yeah. You're touching on big points there. When we were cutting each other off, I was going to go the other way and say, when you're here, or say someone's in that archetype, because there's multiple people I tattoo that are in this space where I do feel like it's like a sage or a chief type of field. I feel like there's someone here in the space that I'm in the presence of, that I'm doing a marking for, that's very significant. And I
Huh.
got to get myself out of the way. And I know that maybe if we would try and measure up, like maybe someone marking someone within a tribal context back in the day, they're marking the chiefs. Wow, I'm with someone who's done some stuff, knows some stuff, offers some stuff to the community there. They've got a place. It's important. So I can feel a little bit out of my depth too when I'm in that
Huh.
space. So I got to just
Huh.
do my best to not have any masks on, not have any bullshit in there and just be very clean and clear and only speak what is appropriate. So I try to do that,
Mm.
and then also learn and be reciprocal because I'm sharing space where it's okay, I can learn some stuff here that's important. But like you said, it's that you were using the word priest or facilitator of something. Tattooing, it's just a totally essential and necessary part. Like you said, you can't go out into the wilderness and receive. You can receive a marking, you could tattoo yourself, cut yourself, right? But you couldn't receive to the same
Yeah.
depth or with the same gravity of what it is that you've gone through, where it's like the
Mm.
transformation's quite immense, the footprint's big, your body is
Mm.
completely different. And you're right, I don't think a lot of artists get it. There are some, most of the artists I've met are in a traditional cultural context. So they've got like a lot of data behind them that substantiates
Mm.
that. So there's people that get it. Whereas
Mm.
I find within the modern tattoo context, or the one we were talking about that you were never interested in, the cool koi fish sleeve and stuff like
Mm.
that. If I talk about that layer of responsibility with any of the artists, the reality is it's too much. So they don't want
Yeah,
to have to acknowledge that layer of responsibility because it can destabilize everything they're doing.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the other thing you mentioned was that idea of therapy, right? And so when you were here, I think at the last time you were here, you'd said to me, have you ever considered doing any training in therapy? Have you ever considered that
Mm.
as another body of knowledge that would be useful or something, right? And I have for sure, but at the same time, I guess it's just what's on your plate and having time to do it. And maybe I will at some point because that's
Mm.
your field of expertise and you noticed it in terms of some layer within tattooing for yourself. What I
Mm.
thought I'd just ask and see what you would share that could be useful for listeners from a therapeutic lens.
I think, yeah, it came up for me just because I noticed how well, after we had that shift and I was able to relax and be like, "Oh, actually, this guy's holding it. This guy's holding it, I can relax." And then I really felt how much you were holding and how skillfully and how gracefully, and I just realized, "Oh, I think this just must be part of the," in the same way that bartenders become accidental counselors or yoga teachers or body workers
Yep,
become
yep.
accidental counselors. Anytime you're doing something that's deep and powerful, is going to bring stuff up. And then when that comes up, it's, yeah, really useful to have those therapy skills to be able to see the shape of what that is so I have enough clarity that I can help steer that energy in a way that's going to be useful for that person or help to unpick the story that they've got that might be obstructing them in some way. I think just, yeah, so much richness and so much overlap.
So for someone that's getting tattooed, would I be right just to saying just being open to that layer opposed to like you were saying, thinking that, you're on a solo mission?
Open to the layer that there might be a therapeutic relationship with the tattooer, or just open to the idea that there might be some therapy going on at some level.
That, things could come up, and if I think about
Yeah,
it, it's whether someone wants that. I guess for artists or for people getting tattooed, just having the awareness that's a potential, even unintended. It's like you get tattooed, it might just bring something up. And so someone receiving it's like,
absolutely.
okay, something might come up when you get tattooed. And then for an artist, okay, something might come up for someone. You don't need to be looking for it even.
No, it's hard for me to imagine it not stuff not coming up really. If anyone
Mm.
has any kind of undigested distress inside their body, I think of trauma as just undigested distress, something that the nervous system has experienced, hasn't quite been able to get some resolution on. It's not fully moved through the nervous system, the energetic system. Then anytime you bump into suffering and pain, it's liable to come up because I think the nervous system is actually looking for ways to get rid of the things that it's been holding on to. It doesn't want to have them there. We've got this natural healing impulse. And we hold on to them when it's not safe to release it. So if we're in normal everyday life and we don't feel like it's safe to release or feel deeply, then we're just going to hold on to that stuff. But if we enter into a ceremonial situation or a situation where we have to undergo an ordeal and the nervous system gets put under stress, then if any aspect of that experience resonates with any kind of undigested distress that I have, the nervous system is very likely going to say, "Hey, this reminds us of that time. Maybe now's a good time for us to revisit some of that other stuff that has some echoes with this or is reverberating with that."
Uh-huh.
And I think in tattooing, it's like I'm submitting. Someone is inflicting pain on my body, so it's very easy. If anyone has any kind of sort of times in their life where they felt like a victim or felt like someone has inflicted pain on their body, or there's some kind of an intrusion wound, whether it's like some violence or emotional violence, or someone hasn't respected my boundaries or something like that. All of these kinds of experiences are going to be really ripe to have a resonance with the tattoo. And I might start finding myself feeling resentful towards the tattooer, or trapped in this experience, or feeling somehow the victim of this moment in a way that resonates with experiences I've had in the past. And yeah, I think the main thing we just want to know about that is that makes perfect sense. That's natural. That doesn't mean that something wrong is happening. It actually has the possibility to be a really healing experience, because now we get to revisit those feelings and maybe see if I can have a different relationship with them. See that in a different light. Actually, no, this is something I've chosen, in fact. And this is an experience where I am allowed to express emotion, hopefully, if that's the agreement.
Mm-mm-mm.
I'm allowed to weep here. I'm allowed to revisit those times when something wasn't able to be felt fully. And maybe this time I can.
Yeah, interesting, man. It's a nice way to put it. It makes me think about layers of projection that could come into. I've
Yeah.
seen this in some tattoo experiences with people in shop environments, or even for myself, and the ability to just to talk to it, to just go, okay, someone's thinking or feeling something in response to something that's not here right now, actually. Like you
Yeah.
said, it's just resurfaced. And so talking to it and like
Some echoes.
drawing, yeah, getting them to see the reality of, no, you're here getting tattooed and it's okay. And there's no pressure,
Yeah.
even those
Yeah.
things with the pain of it. Saying to people, you don't have to grit and bear something if it's too hard either, and that's okay. And just like letting them know that
Beautiful.
they can steer the ship or whatever. You get as much done as you're meant to get done at
Beautiful.
any point. There's never any,
Yeah.
yeah, any force. That's one I think that's missing a lot.
Yeah, which could be a profoundly therapeutic experience. Hey, it's like, okay, my body's got this memory of a time when I was trapped in a painful experience and I wasn't able to say no, or I wasn't able to say this is enough. I tried to push myself through it, or I tried to dissociate, or whatever. But now I can say, actually, I'm done with that. No thanks. Or I can find a way to be with myself through that and sort of reparent myself through that in some way.
Yeah. Or
Mm,
conversely, another one I've seen is needing to help them to say no to it. You don't need to push through it. You don't
yeah.
need to get it. You don't have to go along with it as well. That happens as
Yeah.
well, where people are like, oh, why do I want to push through it? Why am I okay with getting a tattoo? Because I don't want to voice that there's something that I don't want in the tattoo. I had a guy here, another tattoo artist, and we were doing some mapping of his tattoos. He had 50 plus tattoos. And the tattoo that we were going to do after spending a day talking was a cover up. And we were like, oh, we've been talking for so long, we'll tattoo tomorrow. And then the next day, he's like, would it be okay? He's real timid about it. If we tattooed somewhere else, would that stuff you up? You got to draw again. Da, da, da. I was like, totally okay. If you think it should be someone else, like 100%, we got to do the other thing. There is no wrong way. There's no stuffing up, or like, he'd realized that, and all of the 50 tattoos, he'd always just gone along with what the first idea was, and never once had intervened and course corrected ever in
Mm,
all of the tattoos. It was the first time he'd ever done it, and ended
mm,
up with something completely different.
mm.
I was like, wow, how good's that? Yeah, there's
Beautiful.
a lot of different ways it can play out.
It's so ripe. Hey, the practice of tattooing is so full of meaning and metaphor. Like it teaches us about pain, teaches us about power relationships, teaches us about boundaries. What I say yes to, and then the needle is intruding through, passing through the boundary of our skin into our shelter, so that the shelter of our body is going to flush up stuff. Yes, so much richness.
I think it's innately full of all of these rich concepts and experiences. It is. So, of course, humans have always done it everywhere. The actually engaging with it, I think a lot's missed at the moment.
Yeah.
People aren't really squeezing out as much as they could, whether that's the artist squeezing it out with the client or the client doing it. A lot of it just gets missed. There's a lot of
Hmm.
waste in the process. That's a good way to segue into this last little area that I want to talk to you about, which is, I've got it down here as community and family, but I wanted to talk to you about optimal future spaces, community spaces, and maybe how we can get there, or what you think some simple steps and things that we can implement in our everyday could get us there. I'm always thinking about tattooing from that way, like within a family context, each person, how they engage with their tattoos and share that with their children or their siblings or their parents, and that sort of hopefully fostering tattoo relationships in the future that create more community and more, just like better relationship. And so for yourself, what sort of guiding and supporting structures in the fields you're in the vision quest space where you're doing real sacred things, in the counseling space, in the rewilding and working with kids? I thought you're on here, there's an audience listening, and that's your field. Feel free to share and go into anything you want there that will be useful for listeners, and we can riff on that a little bit.
Mm. Yeah, what I'm interested in is broad in one sense because spans therapy and family camps and nature connection and survival trips and stuff. But in another sense, it's quite narrow. I think I'm just interested in how to be a human being in the fullest and freest sense. And so all of those things, it's just how do we relate to each other? How do we relate to our environment? How do we enact meaning and express meaning in our lives? To me, that's the sort of the web that hangs all of those kind of jewels on. And I think part of that, another way of thinking about that web, or where I choose to focus on my efforts on exploring how do I be a more full human being, I'm really interested in culture, the idea of culture and what culture actually is. One of the ways I think about it is it's the invisible web of what we sort of know to be true, but we rarely express, the things that we assume and that are invisible. That becomes what culture is, our sense of what's possible, what's right, what's good. And I think all of us, in every interaction that we have with ourselves as well as with each other and with our environments, we're all enacting these stories of culture. We're all enacting what's good, what's possible, what's right, what does it mean to be a human being. And I love that idea because it means that wherever we are, whatever we're doing, we're all creating this culture together. And culture is it's this collective thing. It's this thing that's larger than the sum of our parts. It's not any one person, but just maybe we can kind of plant seeds within this cultural fabric that have resonances or become a gathering point for someone else or becomes a line in the sand or becomes a
Mm.
flag that we're flying that enables the accumulation of other kind of resonant aspects of that culture to come together. And then we start to hit tipping points where stories can actually shift and norms can shift and things can be let go of and released along the way. And then our culture starts to become more healthy, we can prune off those dead limbs and start to grow new, fresher fruits. Um,
Yeah, beautiful imagery that I'm getting as you're sharing that. I think about it, obviously, tattooing's like my little field, my little focus point, which I've had to
yeah.
let go of and understand it's connected to the bigger thing, the bigger village thing, the bigger culture thing. Like when I was in New Zealand, Moko's tattooing me, and he's honed in on tattooing within the cultural context. And he's like, but there's all these other things. And he feels there's a feeling that I want to do tattooing and this, but he knows that other people have got those other flags, so to speak, or other people are focused on those
Huh.
points. And together, tattooing's not isolated. It's not like a power object. I think that's the language you used. Together, they create that culture that's healthy. And so
Yeah.
tattooing within the Western culture is not healthy because it's disconnected from everything else. So I
Yeah.
can see that
Yeah.
with you, and I can be like, okay, Lee's holding this sort of post down. People can go do this stuff with him. Then they can do tattooing with
Hmm.
me. They can
Hmm.
do it with someone else. And so I can see that imagery
Yeah.
you're talking about. Also, like now reflecting on it, one of the things you helped me with in our discussions when you were getting tattooed, and I think relates to this, is you're talking about this culture of and the invisible web or the invisible center. Everyone's connected to this center, and we go, so this is what it's about. This is what's good. We all know it. Doesn't need to be spoken about. We're bound by it. And I can remember having chats of like good, bad when we were here. And we were like, it was a little bit of like, we weren't quite understanding each other. And I was like tussling, going like, there is good, there is bad. And if I can remember correctly, you were basically just trying to get me to release the charge. I even noticed then when you were talking, you were like lines in the sand and understanding of what's good. And you didn't give any charge to the what's bad there. So I don't know, do you have anything to say to that? Because I still have this is true, this is not true, this is good, this is bad. But I have let go of the charge. And I think like your chats really helped me
Yeah.
not dwell on them or carry them around, but
I guess my feeling is just there's so much of that polarizing, this is good and that's bad at the moment in the world. And the minute we have that polarity, we're in a tug of war with that polarity. It takes us into a sort of relationship with it that we may or may not want. Maybe we like the fight, or we like to be warriors and we like to campaign and we want to push back against that. But I think often at some point, people tend to get a bit tired of that, a bit burned out. And if nothing else, it limits my interaction with the world because it's hard to get free of that polarity now. I'm dancing with that. And so the way I try to think about it, and of course I have my judgments too and my edges of things that I'm working on, but the way what I'm aiming for is to be able to look at everyone in the web as just following their good. Everyone's following what they think is good. Whoever it
Mhm.
is, the person that who springs to mind when we think about the most abhorrent, horrifying members of our society, the people that we see and we're like, oh my God, that person's almost subhuman, or they're an idiot, or they're X or Y or Z. They're still following their good. And from my perspective, I think that's how creation is supposed to work. It's like we all follow our good and then we reap the rewards of that. We harvest the fruits of what following our good means. And it's important that we're free to follow our good, which doesn't mean that we won't hold boundaries. It doesn't mean that we won't say, actually, we don't accept that behavior, or it doesn't mean we're just going to let loose with chaos. It means that we understand everyone's just trying to follow their good, and then they're going to experience the consequences of that. Sometimes the consequences of that might be consequences from other humans who say, actually, that's completely unacceptable. I'm not allowing that. That's a no from me. Or it might just be, oh, for me, my good is just accumulating wealth. And then I get there, and this is an experience lots of people have when they finally get abundantly wealthy, and they realize, oh shit, now I have this crushing depression inside because I have the $1 billion or whatever it is, a multi-million dollars, and I still have got the emptiness inside. That's okay. It's like
Mm.
that's the journey. We follow our good, and until we realize, oh, that wasn't quite our good. And in the same way that an aeroplane is constantly course adjusting, it's never really 99% of the time. It's not actually pointing at its real destination. It's going there, now it's going here. It's moving towards that. We're trending somewhere, but we're constantly having to make course adjustments. And it's important that we're able to do that. I think real learning doesn't happen just because someone gives me information and says, hey, this is a good way to live. You need to do this. Read these commandments or read this text and do that. I don't think real learning happens that way. I think real learning happens through experience and following my good and then seeing what happens as a result of that. And then I adjust my sense of what's good.
Yeah, so it's like a process of discerning what good is in the pursuit of good. So
Yeah.
you can start to narrow down what good is by experiencing things and revealing for yourself that it's, like you said, taking away the deadwood. I want my path of good, and this no longer fits that model, so I can remove it or reduce it or more like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And I guess
Yeah.
focusing on what it is opposed to what it's not is going to be more beneficial,
Yeah. I think so.
maybe.
Hopefully, I got to bump into the cultural fabric around tattooing after this tattoo, because I had the first one with the eels, it was hidden, and now with the flowers on my
Mm.
shoulders and back, it's a lot more visible now. And I realized, I think I mentioned it to you looking in the mirror when I got back home, or maybe it's even still while I was with you. My first thought was, oh shit, I look like a criminal. Like I was like
Oh,
Yakuza
yeah, yeah.
vibes, or I grew up with stories from China where outlaws and criminals were tattooed, and I bumped into that. And it was a really interesting experience to go through that because I knew what my inside experience was, my inside reality was, and then bumping to looking at it through outside eyes and be like, oh my God, what are other people going to think about this? It's another sort of like a
Mhm,
bad
mhm.
polarity that's just really resolved in me, but it was just really it's striking for a minute there. Yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of work that's being done in this place of culture. So you wouldn't bump up against
yeah,
that if you were, say, you're in New Zealand and you got tattooed. You're not gonna bump up
yeah,
against that external viewpoint, whereas you will if you're in China or Japan, or even go back
yeah,
15 years in Australia, you would. I go into this a fair bit in the course stuff that I'm doing. So there's 2 stages and there's 4 acts that happen on each stage. So there's your internal stage and your external stage, which is exactly what you're talking about. And then a transformation occurs physically, which is how you look, mentally, how you think, emotionally, how you feel, and spiritually in who you are. And so there can be currently, because our culture's not fully healthy or it's not fully developed. It's in like an immature stage, I'd suppose. There can be these discrepancies. But for me, this thing's extremely elevating, like you said, and sacred and has all these layers of resonance. And externally, it might start to give you, people might project something that might feel a little bit shameful, or there's these incongruencies that are still there because it hasn't been fully resolved or integrated into a bigger cultural understanding. Or it's not a precept, but yeah, so it's, yeah, I do remember you saying it. I think you said it, you got a text message from someone like your father or maybe a friend or someone, and they said that you were gonna have Yakuza credit afterwards.
That's right. That's right. I liked what you said, your response about you talking about the cultural wounding, which completely related to the rewilding journey, but the cultural wounding around how tattoos got taken from something that was in indigenous cultures and traditional cultures was a beautiful, elevated, sacred, powerful thing. And it became taboo and just used for outlaws and to brand criminals. Yeah. And we're reclaiming that now. There's a movement of reclaiming that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. So it went from being, I'd say, in its right place to being completely inverted, and then people ran with that. So again, bad people following their good, but people go, people are scared of this, and people will think
Mhm.
this, and I'm going to exploit that. So it actually started getting used in the opposite way. And
Mhm.
now I feel like we've washed that out a little bit. The stereotypes aren't there as strongly. You can get tattooed and get a job
Mhm.
and whatever, it doesn't matter. A mum can get tattooed, a doctor can be tattooed, it doesn't matter. But
Mhm.
it's quite empty. Looping back to what we were saying, it's a lot's getting wasted in the process. You could squeeze a
Mhm.
lot more juice out of it if it was back in its
Mhm.
rightful place, so to speak.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I think that's
Mhm.
part of these conversations, squeezing the juice out.
Yeah, I love it. It relates to the other kind of earth-based skills, that just earth-based living. It's like when you learn about how to live close to the earth and you realize how fundamental a cutting tool is. Like humans can't be humans without cutting tools out in the bush. But now carrying a cutting tool out
Mm.
in public is taboo, or is seen as a terrifying or bad thing. Or I couldn't carry like a hunting weapons down the street. Or if I light a fire in public, that's seen as like dangerous and taboo. I must be a crazy person. Or if I, wear a loincloth or mud camouflage, or the kind of things that would like naturally be the most comfortable for deep earth-based living, that must be this crazy savage or something like that. It felt like there was a resonance there with the tattooing. Yeah.
Ah, yeah, no, very interesting. Yeah, you're making me like picture like wanting to just walk down the street. If I go walking here, I'll take a spear with me. And I actually saw that once. I had a guy here from Sydney. We'd finished for the day. I just walked out to one of the dams with the kids. I came back. It's got like a poly handle and it's got a cap, a sheath on it and stuff, just as a walking stick, really. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, you got a spear." I'm just like, "Oh, I don't think twice about it out here, but sure, in the like urban environment, it's really taboo." So, yeah, you're right. For people listening, if you just want to share what trails are open in terms of connecting with yourself and working with you, if you have things coming up, I personally want to get along to some stuff with you in the not too distant future, hopefully in the next year or two, just
Mm,
because I know being in your presence has been really valuable, very real.
mm,
So for people that are
mm.
looking for some type of break or opening to go do something different and connect and yeah, garnish some of this, the layer of wisdom, but like very innate stuff. Again, not trying to elevate Lee or myself. They're just these things that we don't have as much connection to these days, or opportunity.
Yeah, thanks. Well, yeah, so twice a year, spring and autumn, we run our rewilding family camps where we have a bunch of mentors take the kids away to teach nature connection and survival skills. We run them in school holidays twice a year. We'll be running a vision quest in September. That's the 4-day wilderness solo. We normally run survival trips, but my business partner, Gina, just won Australian alone. And so her life is taking a big trajectory change. And it's a kind of a pause on our calendars for a bit, the programs that we run together. But yeah, usually survival trips together where we go out for 5 days, just wearing shorts and a t-shirt and taking a knife and a blanket. And yeah, my main focus these days is my psychotherapy work, and I'm running psychotherapy training every other year. So the next one coming up is in 2025 for people who want to train to become a
Nice.
psychotherapist. there's a certification course I'll be running. And yeah, I think you'll have the website, say,
Beautiful.
along with the podcasts. Is that
Yeah,
right?
so I'll put all your links up so people can just go through the
Great.
notes at the bottom, and they'll have all of the links to find any of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, man. Yeah, maybe I can line myself up for the 25 course with you. That'd be a good place, I reckon. Good place.
That'd be
to aim.
awesome. Yeah, it'd be lovely to have you in the group.
Lee, I really appreciate your time, mate, and all of the stuff you've been able to share here for people listening.
Yeah, no, thank you, brother. Every day I look in the mirror and I feel absolutely blessed and grateful to you and to the manner and journey that we went on together. Yeah, thank you for your work.
Oh, no worries, mate. You're welcome. Thanks for meeting me here.
Mm.
So that was a great talk. All the links to work with Lee are below. Unfortunately, this episode's a little bit late for the September Vision Quest. If you're interested in that, Lee told me the other day they released the dates on their website and they filled all their spots in a number of hours. However, if you did feel the clarity of mind and purity of heart that Lee brings to all of his interactions, and you want to learn from him or do some work with him, there are plenty of opportunities, including his psychotherapeutic training next year. So follow the links, get in touch with him. Also, the Tattoo Pathway course is open for expressions of interest, which can be made via a waiting list at tattoopathway.com. There'll be a lot more on that this month. I'll probably put up an episode speaking specifically to the developments in the Tattoo Pathway. It's getting pretty close now to being open, which feels really good because it's been developing very consistently and smoothly over the start of this year. And again, thank you for listening. Thank you, Lee, for your time. I hope you all have a really good day or evening, and I'll catch you next episode.